It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another Real Estate Podcast. Of course, here every morning you can stream us, listen to us anywhere, maybe having breakfast on the drive to work or perhaps out for a walk. And we are reporting on all property markets from Perth to Brisbane 7 days a week and talking to key professionals in your marketplace to help keep you updated on the Australian property market. Woohoo, we're here. We're on a Friday morning, February the 28th. And I see that the Australian housing prices have far outpaced wage growth, and the recent market slowdown has done little to bridge the gap. Experts say that housing affordability would require a prolonged period of stable prices while wages catch up. That, of course, is very much an unpopular scenario for existing homeowners. Domain reported that in the December quarter, the median dwelling values across capital cities have actually hit 1.01 million, more than doubling. Yes, doubling since 2012. Well, right now, let's go to Perth and catch up with Matthew Hughes, the Managing Director from Capital Property Advisory. Good morning to you, Matthew. A little bit of good news in your corner. You were voted on to PIPA, so congratulations. Well done.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity for me to join the board of PIPA, which is the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, for anyone who's unaware of them, and join some of the top practitioners in the industry and help them advocate for higher standards in the industry, support investor education, and get people access to qualified independent advice. So I'm actually in Brisbane right now, having just completed my first board meeting yesterday, and it was a very productive day, and I'm looking forward to what we can achieve this year together.
How big is the organisation, just for those listening this morning?
There's hundreds of members across the country, and it's one of the longest standing organisations in the country as well. And all the members adhere to a strict code of conduct. And it's not, I'm also a member of REBA, which is the Real Estate Buyers Agency Association of Australia. That's specifically for buyers agents, whereas PIPA extends to other advisors, finance and mortgage brokers, accountants, anyone in that space.
You're always getting busier and busier, spreading yourself all over the place. Right, let's get into talking about Perth, because in a recent article it was suggested that Perth is heading towards a housing oversupply, but I think you're sort of challenging that viewpoint a little bit.
The article was by Michael Matusik, who's a respected journalist and data analyst. Certainly not trying to pick holes in Michael's work, but just on this particular one, his claim that Perth is moving towards oversupply probably doesn't align with what's actually happening on the ground here. So while there may be more dwelling approvals in the pipeline, the real issue, as we've discussed previously, is the time it takes to deliver those and where the supply is being delivered. And the reality is that in areas with good transport links, employment hubs and essential amenities, land supply is still critically low in Perth. The available land that we see tends to be out on the far urban fringe, so you see the city further sprawling out, which is not what we want. And out there, the demand tends to be weaker and infrastructure is still catching up. And then on top of that, again, as we've discussed previously, many builders are struggling with labour shortages and material costs, meaning that even approved homes are going to be taking a lot longer to build. And the idea that Perth is on the verge of oversupply completely ignores those factors. So if anything, I think we're still facing a shortfall of well-located housing, and I think the market remains under significant pressure and will do so for some time.
Now, there seems to be, doesn't there, a little bit of an argument that Melbourne won't be able to meet housing demand due to supply constraints. However, you know, as you say, you've pointed out that there's significant land availability. So what's the real issue driving the supply challenge, do you think?
Yeah, look, Melbourne, there's more than one thing can be true, and Melbourne does have plenty of englobo land or developable land available for future housing, particularly in its outer growth corridors. But the real issue isn't the lack of land, but rather the high costs of the land itself and the financial viability of new home construction. So simply having the land available doesn't mean it will be developed at the pace needed to meet future demand. Additionally, I think that even though Melbourne has the capacity for more housing, affordability remains a major hurdle. So if land land and construction costs continue to rise, fewer buyers will be able to afford these new homes, which will likely stifle development activity of all density types. So whilst Matusik suggests Melbourne can't meet demand, and I believe he's right on this point, the real issue isn't a shortage of land, it's whether or not new housing can be delivered at a scale and price that makes sense for developers and buyers.
Now back to Perth. Yesterday we did talk to Nicola Powell from Domain about the Perth house entry, and that at the moment is at $645,000. The annual change over the last 12 months is 26%. That's about $133,000 in your pocket. Over a 5-year period, 74.3%, $275,000. So for those of you that are interested in those numbers. Now, Melbourne, since we're talking about Melbourne, the property market there, it has lagged behind other capital post-COVID, but does appear to be shifting. Let's look at the market performance then, including stock levels, auction clearance rates, and average time on the market, Matthew.
Yeah, look, to your Perth comments about, obviously Perth had the most explosive growth post-COVID, and we've led the country in growth over the last few years. But Perth, the thing to remember with Perth is it came off a very low base. So whilst we've had those extraordinary percentage growth figures, we're still relatively affordable compared with other capital cities. In regards to the Melbourne market, after some time of seeing things, look, I think the market's undervalued. It's been trending in the opposite direction to Perth, albeit at very small percentage points. But I think the market's seen some positivity just recently. There's always a lag on these statistics. So on the ground, we're seeing that demand is certainly increasing for affordable properties. There's a lot of investors and buyers, agents and advisors in certain suburbs at the moment, buying up good quality property and creating really high demand for those at the moment. And we're starting to see just some over the very short term, so I wouldn't call it a trend just yet, but days on market have started to drop. Auction clearance rates are trending up, and stock levels, which have been rising for some time, are actually starting to contract a little bit as well. So all signs that the market may be close to bottoming out, and the start of a steady growth cycle could only be months away, in my view.
And we're talking with Matthew Hughes from Perth, who is in Brisbane this morning. We'll come back after this with more.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
And right now it is time for another property tip, and we are going into Victoria. Recently we spoke to Anthony Webb from Bell Property. You've got a property tip here. It's all about, I guess, doing the due diligence on property.
I think it really is. One of the things I advise a lot of buyers to do is when they're buying a property in a suburb, don't just choose a suburb, really get to know that suburb. Everyone knows that there's good parts of suburbs, bad parts of suburbs, but I think when people are doing their searches online, they don't really know where those good and bad parts are. So going in and having an explore, seeing where the train lines are, seeing where the shops are, seeing where the busy roads are, they can have a really big difference. You know, in some suburbs, just being in a certain school zone can add 10% to your price when you eventually go to sell versus being outside of the school zone. So knowing little tips and tricks like that around a suburb, I think is actually really critical. And like I said, it can be the difference in your eventual sale price by about 10%.
Yeah, one of the things that I've mentioned a few times is to get out of your car and knock on the doors, the neighbours. Like if you're looking at one particular house, you think that's great, but just go 3 properties either side across the road, talk to people, because there's always at different times weird stuff that can be happening in streets, and you want to uncover that before you buy.
I completely agree. I mean, some people can get a little bit uncomfortable going and knocking on a door, but even perhaps going and speaking to the local cafe or speaking to the local restaurant or the local milk bar and having a really good conversation with them. People love to talk about where they live, so they'll be really open and honest and talk to you about the good and negative points about any place.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week.
And it is a Real Estate Friday. Just back to some of these numbers from Nicola Powell from yesterday in the Perth Property Market. The Perth unit entry price now, $410,000. That's got an annual change of 30.2%, 95 grand. And across 5 years, 54.7% growth. And that is a growth of 145,000. Matthew, Melbourne investors and first home buyer activity are key indicators of market sentiment. How do you reckon that these groups have been tracking recently in Melbourne, and what impact have interest rates, even though we've just had one, making on the confidence level?
Yes, it's certainly having an impact on confidence. We're seeing a lot more talk about Melbourne from online content creators and advisors who have their YouTube shows and podcasts and so forth. And on the ground, we're seeing a definite shift in buyer sentiment, especially with the recent interest rate cut providing some small relief and the expectation of more cuts bolstering confidence for buyers. First home buyers have been re-entering the market for the last several months now, partly due to improved affordability from slightly softer prices in some areas. And then on the investor side, the story is a bit more nuanced. We're seeing some investors are still wary due to regulatory changes, economic uncertainty, concerns over future capital growth. Those sorts of things are holding some back. But that said, with borrowing costs easing, we're seeing signs that investor confidence is starting to rebuild and affordable markets are gathering steam from our experience on the ground over there. But I think overall, the market's in a period of transition. While some buyers are more optimistic than they were a year ago, many, as they tend to do, are still taking a wait-and-see approach and watching what happens with interest rates, the economy, the state election before they make any big decisions. So in my view, I think the smart money is jumping into the market now before all the sheep arrive eventually, and that's what we're doing with a lot of our clients. As you know, a lot of people want to see others doing it first before they jump in.
All right, let's head back to Perth right now because I want to talk about the trends and what you're seeing on the ground there. And how's the demand across different price tiers evolved, especially after the first rate cut and, of course, more to come?
Yeah, look, as I think we've discussed this previously as well, but we're seeing more and more of it. I don't see as much value in the bottom quartile of pricing anymore. So clients who come to us with a budget that is sub $650,000 for investment, we're encouraging them to consider other markets outside of Perth. I just feel like that we've had more growth in that sector than we have in other pricing sectors, and not as much value there, but there's more downside risk if you're buying into the sort of areas that you have to go into with that sort of budget if you're buying a house. The $1 to $2 million pricing tier is running pretty hot at the moment. We spoke about this last time with some auction results and some crazy attendances at home opens for nice sort of $1 to $2 million family homes. And so that's probably the hottest sector of the market here at the moment, where we're seeing multiple offers on most properties and prices are exceeding our appraised range in most cases, sometimes substantially. I expect this price range is probably going to be the outperformer this year and will be the driver of our median price growth this year, as opposed to the past few years where we've been driven by that bottom quartile we spoke about.
All right, there he is, the man that is here, there and everywhere, Matthew Hughes on our Friday morning. Hey, Matthew, enjoy your weekend, enjoy Brisbane. Always nice to get out of your state. Plenty of worse places to be than Brisbane, and look forward to catching up soon. Enjoy your weekend.
Likewise, Craig. Talk to you soon.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
So, Jacko, I think you've done the right thing there. Job security in many industries isn't a guarantee. Well, let's face it, in what job do you get these days where you can say, I've got a guaranteed job for the next 2, 3, 4 years?
First of all, congratulations to Jacko that he was, is at that point where he is really planning to make that move. And I think the worst scenario that you could potentially be in is losing your job and then defaulting on those mortgage repayments. And I would always lay every decision needs to be the primary guidance is what is right for you.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.